Hey everybody, welcome to Fit Tip Tuesday. Today I'm going to hit two birds with one stone. I have a friend who needed me to hem a pair of her son's jeans, and so I thought I would show you how to hem jeans while maintaining the original hem stitching on your jeans. You can see in front of me I have the jeans I need to hem. I've already done one leg. And the reason why I did it off camera was to show you that the way I'm going to show you to mark and cut ends up working to create the length you need. And what I mean by that is I laid my inseams together. I lined those up so you can see that the finished length is correct. This folded edge is the finished length that we need. And then here is the hemmed leg, and it worked out perfectly lengthwise. So I'm going to show you how I got this in a minute. First, this works best with straight leg jeans, meaning the leg is the same width somewhere at the knee all the way to the hem. That way when you cut off this original hem and sew it up higher, it will match. That's the first thing. The second thing is sometimes you have cool top stitching and you don't have matching thread. So if you want your hem to match, doing it this way will keep that look. Plus, on some denim, you can see here, there's distress at the hem, and it's kind of cool to keep that. Those are some reasons why you might want to hem your jeans this way versus just measuring, cutting off the extra, folding it up, and top stitching it again. Let's take a look at it from the inside. What I did was, after I sewed it, I finished the raw edges with a 3-thread narrow so it doesn't ravel, and then I pressed the seam allowances up, and that makes a nice smooth finish. You can see that that looks really cool. All right, so let me show you how to do this technique. All right, so the first step is I'm going to turn the leg that I'm working on inside out. That's the first step. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to unfold my hem because I marked it with pins. And I'm just going to go around with a pencil and a ruler, and I'm just going to mark where I want my finished hem to be. And I'm basically marking it, you know, based on the fold in the fabric and where I put my pins. That way I can take the pins out. Okay. All right, so this line represents where we want the finished length to be. So the first thing we have to figure out is how wide is our original hem. And most jean hems are 1/2 inch to 5/8. This one's a 1/2 inch. Okay, so we know that when we sew this hem back on, it's going to add a 1/2 inch of length back on. So the first thing we have to figure is that 1/2 inch. Okay, so, all right, so I'm adding that 1/2 inch in. That's the width that will then drop down to here. So if we take this hem off and sew it on, the top of the hem will be here and the bottom of it will be lined up with the length, you know, to the length that we need. However, we have to consider our seam allowances. Let's do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So the first thing is, let's mark our seam allowance here. So I'm just going to go around and mark a 1/4 inch above the hem all the way around. All right, so that's where we're going to cut our hem off. So the next step is, let's, just for clarity and to make it really simple so nothing gets screwed up, I'm going to measure the 1/2 inch allowance for the hem above our finished length. Because we're adding on that 1/2 inch, it really changes what we have to do here. So let me just mark this. Okay, so if we were to look at these two lines, would be the bottom of our finished hem once we sew it back on. So we added a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, so we're going to have to add a 1/4 inch seam allowance here as well. We're going to measure that 1/4 inch from this top line. So we're going to add the length we need to sew the hem on from this top line. I'm going to do it in a different color so it's clear. Let's see if pink shows up. Or how about green? Green is going to mean go, or the final cutting line. So I'm doing a 1/4 inch from that top line. We could have also measured up from the original hem, but I'm just trying to keep it consistent. So we're adding our seam allowance onto here. This is actually going to be our stitching line up here. All right. Okay, so now we've got our cut line to cut off the extra length, and we've got our cut line to cut off our hem. You never want to cut, don't use a rotary cutter and go straight through both thicknesses because they might not be lined up. So what I'm going to do is the fabric between our two cut lines is garbage now. We don't need it. So I'm going to start in here and make a hole. And then I'm just going to veer over to my top cut line. And I'm just going to use my big sharp scissors. And I'm just going to cut along my green cut line for my seam allowance for the bottom of the leg. Okay. I'm going to go all the way around. All right, now let's deal with cutting off the finished hem. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to follow my scissors along this 1/4 inch guide that I marked. I like my scissors for this technique. All right, so I'm just going to go all the way around. There we go. So here is my hem that I'm going to sew back on to the bottom of my jeans, and here's the extra that we don't need. So put that over there for now. Okay, so now the next step is we want to pin our hem back onto our leg. So we're going to put right sides together, and the easiest thing to do is just to line up the inseam and side seams. So here's my side seam. So I'm just going to pin that. And then I'm going to come over here and line up my inseam. You want to try to get that stitching to match. All right, and then because we're working with a straight leg, you can see that that matches back up really nicely. So see how if we were working with a flared or tapered hem, it wouldn't match up. So with a straight leg, this is really easy. It's almost easier to do this than to cut it off and sew a new hem, because my hem is going to look perfect because we're using the factory top stitching. We're not fussing with it. So, all right, so I put some pins in there. Now I'm going to get my machine up and I'll show you how to sew it. All right, so I'm going to use my edge stitching foot, and I'm going to start somewhere near my inseam. So you can see here, I've got my guide butted right up against that hem. We just want to snug up and sew as close to that hem as we can. That will make it the least noticeable that we're sewing the hem back on. So I've got my stitch length set at 2.2. I've got my guide right up against the top of the hem here, and my needle is going to be sewing right next to that. Now when I get to bulky areas, I may have to stop, lift the presser foot up so it doesn't dig into the bulky seam here. Just going to sew really slowly across those bulky seams. Taking my pins out as I come to them. Notice I'm sewing inside the circle. So if you don't have a machine that has a free arm, this makes it really easy to see everything and not stitch something you don't mean to stitch from underneath. It makes it really easy to keep track of what you're doing. I'm back at my start point, so I'm just going to back tack. Okay, so I'm going to take this presser foot off. When I finished, I'm going to put my standard presser foot back on here. When I finished the other one, I used my serger, and I really didn't love the way that worked. So instead of using the serger to finish these raw edges, I'm going to use the triple zigzag. And I'm going to set my width at 4, so it's a narrow zigzag. Oops. And I'm going to leave the default at 1.0. Let's see how that looks. I think this is going to be easier and it'll work just as well as using the serger. So if you don't own a serger, a triple zigzag, or sometimes it's called a multiple zigzag or a 3-step zigzag, it takes a stitch, 3 stitches in each direction. So it goes stitch, 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 stitch. And that does a really good job of protecting edges from fraying. So you can see this is working really easily. That way I don't have to drag my serger out either. And again, you want to go slow over the bulky parts. All right, and I'm just going to overlap my start point a little bit. All right, so let's look at this now. You're going to have these little hairies. You can cut them off, but that will do a nice job of keeping the edge from fraying. I think it's less noticeable too. All right, so now let's get the iron set up. All right, I have my little Aliso iron here. perched on the end of my sleeve board. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my jean leg on here, and I'm just going to go around and press the seam allowances up. If you want to use your serger to finish this edge, you can do that, but I would do a 3/8 inch seam allowance instead of a 1/4 inch, so it's not so close to the bulky folded hem edge. So you can definitely use your serger if you want to. Just giving you other option. All right, so after I press it on this side, I'm going to turn it right side out so we can see what it looks like from the right side, and we're going to give it another press. All right. See how nice that looks? All right, so I know we can see this seam on camera, but when you're wearing your jeans and the hem is all the way down by your feet, it really is not noticeable. What the eye will see is the matching top stitching. Another tool you can use on, for the part of the hem where the side seam and inseams are, that can be a little pesky, so I'm going to use my mini clapper Point Perfect pressing tool to trap the heat and make a nice crisp edge. So see how nice that looks? I'm also going to do it on the opposite, on the inseam here. Heat it up, you give it a little steam, and then trap the heat for a minute, and that will help it lay nice and flat. All right, let's take a look at our hemmed jeans. All right, look how nice those look. Top stitching matching the hem, very nice. Happy snappy. All right, so, okay, again, just to compare, here is a serged finish, which looks nice, or you've got your triple zigzag finish, and this is going to just fray, after you wash these the first time. Once you trim off whatever frays during the first wash, it's not going to keep fraying. That triple zigzag will do a good job of, keeping it from fraying more. So you can either do this with the triple zigzag, or you can do this with your serger. So either way, finish those raw edges so they don't ravel. And that's it. That's how you hem your jeans while keeping the original top stitched hem. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below and I will help you. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next week for Fit Tip Tuesday.